Why is it that sometimes nothing has failed, nothing has collapsed, nothing dramatic has happened, and yet you suddenly realize the life you're living now is not the life you once imagined you would be living? Why is it that you're still trying, still adapting, still getting things done? From the outside, everything looks fine, functional, acceptable. But inside, a quieter awareness keeps growing. You're moving through your days, but you rarely stop to ask, do I actually want to keep living like this? And why is it that when this discomfort first appears, you don't change right away? Instead, you endure. You rationalize. You tell yourself, this is fine for now. Until one day, you realize something unsettling. You weren't lost. You just haven't chosen your own life in a very long time. If these thoughts feel familiar to you, then today's conversation is not about becoming better, and it's not about forcing yourself to turn into someone else through sheer willpower. What we're talking about is a psychological process that is rarely understood, yet appears quietly before nearly every major life shift: self-transformation. Why does it so often begin with discomfort rather than motivation? Why does real change almost always come with confusion, hesitation, and a sense of identity becoming unstable? And why the uncertainty you're feeling right now may not mean you've gone the wrong way, but instead that you're beginning to move closer to who you actually are. You might remember the moment. It wasn't a failure, it wasn't a breakdown. Maybe it happened on your commute, after a meeting, or during a quiet evening. Everything seemed to be functioning as usual, and yet something inside you shifted. You realized you were living a life that made sense, but didn't feel like it truly belonged to you. Psychology describes this experience as self-incongruence. It occurs when your external roles, your job, relationships, identity, begin to drift away from your internal values. The brain responds not with pain, but with a low, persistent signal, a kind of alert discomfort, not loud, but impossible to ignore. You may be doing all the right things: a stable career, sensible choices, a path others recognize as successful. The problem isn't that these choices are wrong, it's that they weren't made from what you want, but from what feels safer, expected, or socially approved. Over time, you don't lose your way. You slowly lose alignment with yourself. Research shows that moments of awareness rarely arrive during dramatic events. They tend to appear in emotional gaps, when the busyness pauses, when defenses relax, when the mind finally has space to speak honestly. That's when you realize you weren't lacking effort. You simply stopped choosing for yourself. This crack in awareness is not a sign of failure. It's the beginning of transformation. Not because something went wrong, but because you're finally willing to see this version of life is no longer moving in the same direction as you. When you've already sensed that something isn't right, yet still don't take action, what holds you in place is rarely laziness or a lack of courage. More often, it's a powerful psychological force known as inner inertia. From a psychological perspective, the brain's primary goal is not growth, it's stability. Familiar patterns feel safe, even when they are quietly draining you. That's why people stay in jobs that numb them, in relationships that no longer feel balanced, in lives that function but don't feel alive. At a neurological level, old patterns are efficient. They require fewer decisions, less energy, and less uncertainty. Change, on the other hand, demands risk. It introduces unpredictability. And most threatening of all, it destabilizes identity. So the brain resists. It doesn't do this loudly. It does it rationally. You tell yourself, it's not that bad. Maybe I'm just overthinking. Now isn't the right time. Things might improve if I wait. Cognitive science refers to this process as psychological homeostasis. When your actions begin to drift away from your established self-image, your mind generates discomfort, not to punish you, but to pull you back toward what feels familiar. So staying where you are is not a personal failure. It's a form of self-protection. And the hardest part of transformation is not recognizing what's wrong. It's finding the courage to move through the inertia that keeps you where you are. Many people believe change means trying harder, more discipline, more motivation, more self-control. Yet what often happens is this: you sustain the effort for a while, and then slowly fall back into old patterns. Psychology offers a clear explanation. Behavior is not the foundation of change. Identity is. If, deep down, you see yourself as someone who always procrastinates, someone who freezes under pressure, or someone who struggles to follow through, your mind will resist any behavior that contradicts that image. Cognitive science refers to this as identity consistency. The brain constantly works to align behavior with self-concept. When your actions move too far away from who you believe you are, internal tension emerges, and the system attempts to restore balance. This is why so many habits fail to last. Not because you lack willpower, but because your identity hasn't shifted. Sustainable change usually begins quietly, not with, "I need to fix myself," but with a subtle internal reframe. I am learning to become someone different. When identity starts to move, behavior no longer requires force. You're not battling old habits, you're aligning with a new self-image. Transformation is not a victory of will, it's a reconstruction of identity. Real transformation rarely feels better at first. More often, it brings a sense of internal disorder. You no longer fully identify with who you used to be, yet you don't know how to live steadily as the person you're becoming. Doubt increases. Emotions fluctuate. Old ways of judging yourself stop working, while new values haven't fully formed yet. Psychology refers to this stage as the transitional zone. It exists between two identities, who you were and who you are becoming. There are no clear answers here, no immediate feedback, only uncertainty and suspension. This is where many people turn back, not because their old life was truly right for them, but because familiarity provides temporary safety. The brain craves predictability, and when things feel unstable, it instinctively tries to restore what it knows, even if that familiarity was the very source of discomfort. Neurologically, this instability is not regression, it's a signal that reorganization is underway. Old mental models are loosening. New frameworks are not yet stable. Your system is briefly out of balance because it's making space for a more integrated version of you. Those who complete transformation are not the ones who avoid confusion. They are the ones who don't rush to escape it. They allow the old identity to dissolve gradually and give the new one time to emerge. By now, you may realize something important. What exhausts you is not change itself. It's the constant pressure to become a clearly defined version of yourself as quickly as possible. You rush to prove you're improving. You rush to shed your old identity. You rush to make the uncertainty end. But transformation is not a race. It's more like a careful shedding, and if you force it, you risk harming yourself in the process. Psychology does not define maturity as having everything figured out. True maturity often shows up as a quieter capacity, the ability to live with uncertainty without rushing to soothe it with premature answers. When you stop asking, "Who should I become?" and begin asking, "Am I living honestly right now?" change starts to unfold naturally. You don't need to immediately like the person you're becoming. You only need to stop denying that change is happening. Allow hesitation, allow repetition, allow parts of your old self to step aside slowly. Identity is not replaced, it's updated. What truly belongs to you is not lost through growth. It remains, just expressed more truthfully. And when you stop rushing to arrive and learn instead to walk alongside change, you may discover something quietly grounding. You were never lost. You were simply, for the first time, choosing your own path. This is Felix. May you understand yourself a little more deeply and treat the version of you that's still unfolding with patience and kindness. See you next time.